a lot of kids who are coming to school without their basic needs met. So we have a component of our Race to the Top grant that is just about how do we help parents to make sure that the needs of their children are met. And you get a lot of involvement when you start talking about we want to help you take care of your kid. So I think having a real reason for those parents to be at the table is probably the very first, most important reason and most important way to get their engagement.
Right. To get into, just again, the potential of working on the system and engaging families, Kentucky State University has a great opportunity to revamp the special ed department. To have those families at that front table as thought leaders, to really expose what we have done with regards to, let's say, acquired learning disabilities through all old systematic processes. And we all know what we're talking about with regards to we've damaged kids. We've labeled them way too early. To now have the family members, to have those who have seen it and are crying out not for help but for solutions, to be a part of that designing of solutions, and being a single cord with regards to how we service our kids. That's where we are right now. And just 2 weeks ago, it was an amazing thing to open up our Franklin County, Frankfort Independent community for those parents who didn't have that voice. It was almost always reactive, but to have that proactive voice, to be at that lead table, again, this is where we are with regards to systematic processes.
I think that the other piece of this is a mind shift, a mindset shift in terms of respecting the parents as having assets, yes, and not just seeing them as coming looking for something, but they bring to the table. When we focused on the 11 lowest performing schools in Boston, we had planning teams, and every principal had to have evidence that they had parents really actively engaged in coming on the team and giving input. So it's doing with parents, not doing to parents, I guess, is the change. And that's hard because with our most vulnerable parents, we've tended to think they don't know what they want, and they actually have a very good sense of what they want for their children. It's about how we listen to that.
One of the examples that I should have shared earlier is through a partnership that we have with the Collaborative Center for Literacy Development in our region. All of our families in our 19 school districts, they are eligible to participate in the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. So all of our families every month are getting a book. So what we're trying to do with our cooperative is to provide professional learning for our families about, okay, so you have this book. Now here's what you can do with your child to help them to be able to read that book, to learn from that book, and sort of just doing training with them around that. So I do appreciate what you say about recognizing that our parents have those talents and have those capacities, and how do we help build on those.
And we had a program called Technology Goes Home, because a lot of our parents don't have really good technology. And so we got companies to give us old computers we've refurbished, or, you know, not old to us, but, you know, they turn over very much. And then Comcast provides $9.95 for a month for people to get internet if they're below the poverty level. So we had a lot of our parents, and they just had to come to so many Saturdays of training, so they were proficient as a family to learn how to use the computer at home.
I guess as a follow-up to that question would be, so how do we get principals open to engage, especially the families of the most vulnerable students? Because from the work that I have done over the years, we noticed that for children who struggle, they often have parents who are struggling in their own literacy skills, as well as their own other kinds of issues that are happening. So how do we get principals, and I'm particularly interested in the principal preparation part, because that's something that many people come to a principalship because without.
Right. And that's one of the, we have a number of clinical experiences that are built into the principal training program. And one of the clinical experiences has to involve parental and family engagement. So one of the things we're trying to do early on is get those folks accustomed to working with parents in a different kind of way than they simply do as a classroom teacher. And so we've had a lot of great examples of that, a lot of great projects, several of which involve health and wellness, where our students are doing that work out there in the field. But that is another area for us to grow in, and in really building better clinical experiences early on, so that our aspiring principals are thinking about it in that particular way. I think particularly for teachers who come out of struggling schools, I find a lot of folks who they approach parents with almost an attitude of we're adversaries in all of this, and we have to wrestle with each other to do what's best for kids. And so there's a mind shift that has to take place to really see our parents as our allies and not our adversaries, and that starts early on in that process.
I think it's particularly true for Ron's point about special education parents. They don't know how to advocate sometimes, and they feel very frustrated about how to get services from us. So the partnerships you're talking about.
Well, Franklin, then Emmanuel, and then Sam. And then we're probably going to have to shift gears.
So we heard how important it is to have good leadership with superintendents and principals, building the partnerships within the community, and it just kind of makes you wonder that if you have, I think we've got over 170 school districts in Kentucky, a lot of rural states have a lot of small districts. I mean, I think all principals are very busy, whether they have 2,000 students or maybe 500, although I guess you could say a really good principal could impact more kids if they have 2,000 instead of 500. But anyway, just going to the superintendents, and you think about how difficult it is and the resources to go into training and getting all this stuff put together, and yet we have superintendents who maybe only have one high school and 3 elementary. I mean, is it just too difficult to even talk about, or should we really be thinking about some economies of scale? I mean, if you were doing it over again, you wouldn't have 175 school districts. Then you might have, what, 50 or 60 or something like that? And then you have 50 or 60 really good superintendents who have got enough schools that it really makes a difference and that they can really implement. I guess what I'm saying is it unrealistic to believe we're going to have best practices that you all were talking about in 175 school districts?
One of the ideas...
Pritchard Committee calls for consolidating all school systems.
I said, is it not even practical to talk about?
Film at 11.
I can't believe he's bringing that up in a state that is so basketball oriented.
You still have a high school. So every county still has their high school. Just the question is, you have a different superintendent over a couple, 3 different county systems.
Gary?
So some of you all know Dr. Justin Baffin at University of Kentucky. He's doing some great work with supporting innovation, and he helps run the Next Generation Academy that they do for teachers and school leaders right around the issues of innovation. I recently had a great conversation with him where he was really promoting the idea of networks of schools, and some of the models we see of this. I'm thinking in particular Owensboro Independent, and some of their innovation work has been done through their partnership with New Tech. And so this is a network of schools where they get the benefit of the experiences of all those other schools that have been down these pathways before. They get tapped into the same professional development. It's expensive, of course, and the community has been very generous in trying to support their involvement in New Tech, but it's a model of what I think might be possible for a lot of other districts, particularly the smaller districts, to pool their resources and help one another. You see that already on some basis through our cooperatives. And so our cooperatives are really dynamic places where a lot of this kind of sharing takes place. I think networking might be another level of that, where schools with very specific needs could work with other schools that are similar to them and share ideas and support each other around their specific growth needs.
Coming from my region, if I were to agree with that idea, they probably wouldn't let me get back on the Mountain Parkway to come back home. But I think
That's the problem.
I think
because the whole care thing came. We had school superintendents who were building political fiefdoms, and that was part of the problem. That's why we didn't trust them to pick principals, because they were going to pick the relative instead of the right.
But I think
Pritchard Committee doubles down. Calls
But I think we have to look at how are we supporting the growth and development of those superintendents? They need that personalized professional learning as well. And those ideas about networking them to learn from each other and making them part of those shared leadership teams, I think is critical.
And that's part of your training and development for local boards of education members as well, so they understand how all of those dynamics are.
We need to have 2 more questions and then we'll move on. Emmanuel, you had a question, I believe? Bridget, sorry about your job.
Emmanuel Washington, thank you for your comments so far. There's been a lot of research and some proven statistics on the agonizing hardship and the psychotic play of transient students. So you can have the best superintendents, you can have the best teachers, the best principals, even the best PTA staff, parents included, and you still have a problem. So I wanted to really, pick you all's brains and see the insight or some of the solutions that you all have developed with your vast communications throughout and leadership throughout the educational system with transient students in particular.
Girl, I assume you've dealt with that in urban
Yes.
settings.
So we did a study that showed in Minneapolis that elementary students who had been in more than 3 schools in their elementary years performed lower than students who were stable during that period of time. I said that once though at a meeting, and a guy stood up and he said, my kids have been in a lot of different schools. I'm in the military. My kids are doing well. So I want to couch what I say with the fact that there are lots of kids who move around a lot because their parents move in the military and so forth or jobs. But they have an infrastructure at home that supports them through that transition. And so they're not as negatively, I'm not saying they won't be negatively impacted, but they're not as negatively impacted. For our poorest families, the instability of home life and school life interplay. The McKinney-Vento Act is a federal act, tells school districts that when a child is homeless or intermittently homeless, the districts are required to try to stabilize the school environment and try to keep them in the same school whenever possible. Obviously, that's not always possible given the high mobility. I think that what principals and schools have to do is try to figure out how we're going to modify and adjust. But it is very hard for teachers when a kid comes in January, February, or March, and they haven't been with you all year, and suddenly there are big, huge gaps in their learning. And so I think that the staff has to see that as a proper practice, particularly in our more mobile schools, and try to figure out what infrastructure we can put together to welcome them. I've been in schools where they put all the new kids up every month that are new to the school, and they do special things. They assign them to a student partner. They do things to mitigate a kid feeling isolated and alone. And so I think that's what leaders have to figure out how to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Sam, why don't you ask a question and close out this portion of the program?
Very quickly, for the question, an editorial comment. I'd suggest that Board Chair Gelsma's mother, a long-term education advocate in Kentucky, does not condone those radical ideas. As Pritchard Committee members and as concerned citizens, I suggest most, if not all of us, are and have been and continue to be very concerned about achievement gap issues. How do we raise achievement overall? A 2-part question. From your all's perspective, how does bold leadership at the local school level potentially impact that situation? And the second part, I'll ask my own controversial question. Is it fair to hold building leaders accountable if we're not able to close those gaps?
If we stick with the current accountability system, it makes no sense. We quickly, as a state, have to define all these new measures that come into play. It opens up the possibilities for the building administrator to truly be creative, but not just their respective staff. Their students have to be a part of the component with regards to how do we really measure effectiveness it's not education alone, it's all these agencies, it's the community that comes into play. And, you know, I don't know if we really realize the beauty of what we're trying to establish with Commissioner Pruitt's accountability task force. And I think that if we continue to kind of look at student achievement based on the old system, it's a trap. If we quickly lead with regards to some of the measurements that, again, opens up learning and is truly a learner's paradigm, then I think amazing things are going to be in store for our state.
Okay, we just got a few minutes left. In rapid fire fashion across, any parting thought for the panelists about maybe that one thing that you think should be done to more adequately prepare and support school leaders?
I want to echo what Dr. Johnson talked about. It's very unfortunate that in our state that our residency or internship programs that we have for principals have faded away, and that breathing new life into